Hey, good evening. This is Lokesh Gawda joining. I'm one of the parents that will be speaking today.
Good morning. This is Alex Burke. I'm the Chief Legal Officer with Uplift. We will be starting in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Officer Reeves, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Hello. How are you doing?
Well, thank you.
Hello.
Hi, John. Welcome. Everyone's just coming on, and we are getting our quorum. Thank you for being on. Richard, I saw you just joined. Hello.
Hello, hello.
I will let you know when we have quorum, Richard. Right now, we have parents and staff on and Officer Reeves.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Can I ask who is calling from 214-445? I'm sorry, 214-455-7166?
Alex, I'm seeing I'm not in your faves yet. This is Ed for you.
Oh, Ed. Okay. Got it. Thanks, Ed.
No worries.
Can we please confirm who just joined at the number 203-997-9015?
Hey, this is Anil Kumar Vanaparthi, and I'm a parent of, yeah. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today. May I ask who just joined at 205-777-7779?
John McPherson.
Thank you, John. Welcome to the meeting. Richard, you have quorum. We'll wait one more minute as two other board members are expected to join, but we'll be able to start promptly at 4:30.
Okay.
Richard, you also have Pilar on, so when you do your roll call, her name won't come up on your attendance, but I'm just flagging for you that Pilar is also joining us. And you now, with Cullum on, have all board members we expect for today, Richard. So you're welcome to kick off the meeting.
Okay. Let me just catch up real quick. Good afternoon. The date is August 24th, 2021, and the time is 4:31 p.m. To ensure we have a quorum present, I'm going to read out the names of the members of the executive committee, and if you're on the call, please say present. Richard Prairie, present. Cullum Clark.
Present.
Don Davison.
Present.
Cameron Johnson. Ed Tarrant.
Sorry, Richard, to interrupt you. Cam literally just joined. So if you'll just ask Cam again, he can respond. He's here.
Okay. Okay. Ed, are you on?
Present.
Yep, thank you. Andre McEwing. Lyle Melville.
Present.
John McPherson.
Present.
James Stanton. Michael Stack.
Present.
John Becker.
Present.
Ryan Moss. Thank you. I note here that we have a quorum of the executive committee present, and I will call to order this meeting of the Board of Uplift Education. I want to welcome a handful of parents from North Hills to the meeting and give a quick thank you for their thoughts and reflections. I also want to thank Officer Robert Reeves of the Irving Police Department, who is joining us this afternoon. Officer Reeves and the Irving Police Department are longtime partners of Uplift in North Hills. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank them for all that they do for us. We have a full agenda this afternoon, so let's get started. Our first item of business is the community forum, and I'll hand it off to Alex, Uplift's Chief Legal Officer, to manage that process. Alex?
Great, thank you, Richard. We are now at the community open forum portion of the meeting. Please note the following rules and procedures apply to Uplift's community forum portion. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. I will run the clock on my end. I will give you a 30-second heads up when we get to 30 seconds. Only those persons who are registered to speak per the rules posted on the agenda may address the board. Speakers will be called in the order they registered to speak. All slots to speak at this time have been filled. If you would like to speak at the September 10th board meeting, you are welcome to email me at aberk@uplifteducation.org when the agenda is posted for the September 10th board meeting, which will be at a later date. Only the person who has registered to speak may address the board. Please, we do not want to have substitution of speakers. That would create an unfair and inequitable process. If there are multiple groups who are planning, if there is a group comprised of 2 or more persons who are planning on speaking at the same time, please just appoint 1 person to address the board. And I want to be clear, the community forum, this is not a question and answer session with the board. Rather, this is an opportunity for speakers to provide commentary to the board only. And lastly, I want to be very clear that the board appreciates respectful, courteous, professional behavior from all speakers and all attendees. It is a violation of law to breach the peace during an Uplift Education board meeting. Attendees breaching the peace will be warned, asked to leave the meeting, or disrupt property, or cited or arrested by police. That being said, we will move on to our first speaker. I have Mr. Ashraf Syed. Mr. Syed, I believe you are present. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, great, Mr. Syed. I'm going to go ahead and start the counter, and I will give you a 30-second warning. Does that sound good?
Sounds good, Mr. Book.
Okay, thank you, sir. Here we go.
Thank you. All right, thank you both. Let me start by reinforcing the Uplift Pledge, what we stand for. Uplift Pledge teaches us that I pledge to do my best this day. Are we truly doing our best? Let's all self-reflect and ask, Are we doing our best to protect our kids in this pandemic? The part of the pledge says to exercise leadership. Are we demonstrating true leadership at every level? Let's ask the question again, looking into the eyes of our kids. Today, I'm here standing for each and every family who would like to know why were the $35 million not allocated towards the virtual learning? Why were the board not think and plan well before the school started? Why? Why was any part of state or federal funds not allocated towards the safety of our kids? What is the use of our education and experience if we can be creative to come up with a solution? When other charter schools in DFW are able to figure out, why can this board and school figure out? Let me state one thing, that providing a safe and nurturing environment is absolutely non-negotiable. Let me just give you an example. You wouldn't board an airplane and trust a person who has never operated one to handle your emergency landing, would you? Just like we should want our leaders who recognize that we are in the midst of a global pandemic, who are aware of the implications and strive to use every tool which is available to minimize the life of support public health. We need decision makers who understand that a balanced budget is not worth throwing caution to the wind as our hospitals struggle to accommodate our community and we jeopardize the health of our vulnerable children. Last night, my doctor friend texted me. He says that Baylor Irving is completely out of capacity. Mothers with COVID are delivering babies prematurely in hopes that the mother can survive. It really breaks my heart. People can choose not to care about COVID, but the truth doesn't change. The threat is real. Each one of us will be responsible for the untoward future we are headed to because we refuse to do what is the right today. Not providing for a virtual option puts them all under unnecessary risk. As their dad, their safety is absolutely non-negotiable. Board and the school needs to act now before our kids become the numbers. We will never ever be able to forgive ourselves. I would ask the board with a broken heart to look into all funding avenues available and stand behind the Uplift pledge, which we teach our kids day in and day out.
That's 30 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Syed. Up next, we have Mohammed Farouk. I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. Mr. Farouk, are you
Yes,
on the
I'm here.
call?
Yeah. Yes, you are
Great, thank
pronouncing
you.
this very good. Yep. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Burke.
so we are going to start 3 minutes now, and I will give you a 30-second warning when we get there.
Works for me. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohammed Farouk, and I'm a parent of two scholars at Uplift North Hills. What I want to emphasize is this is not a normal situation. Rather, these are unprecedented times that we are going through. Dallas looking for 12,000 students who didn't show up to school. Dallas Morning News reported on August 23rd, yesterday. Your child will wait for another child to die. Amid COVID-19 surge, Dallas County has no pediatric ICU beds left. County just says, CNN reported on August 13th. These are not the kind of headlines you would expect to see at any normal time. While most of the ISDs and charter schools took this COVID surge among children seriously and listened to their parents and offered some sort of virtual option, Uplift didn't. Unfortunately, we simply did not see the urgency and ownership from the Uplift to offer any relief. According to the pediatricians, some of whom are standing with us, COVID cases are rising in kids, especially from 0 to 17 years group. On top of that, kids are having long-lasting complications after COVID-19. We only have a couple of children hospitals in DFW area, and the pediatricians working there are getting overwhelmed with the rise in the cases. We called the governor's office, as Uplift webpage suggested, and hoped he would sign an emergency executive order for virtual learning, but he didn't. After weeks of waiting, Senate Bill SB 15 is on the verge of becoming a law. It has already passed the House committee, but we don't know how long it will take to become this law to become effective. Hundreds of Uplift families have suffered enough. So please do not add to those families and scholars' suffering and mental anxiety any further. If you care about the safety and mental health of those scholars, which I know you do, then please do not wait any further and act on this issue with the urgency that it demands. Call for an emergency board meeting if you need to make policy or priority changes, and offer virtual learning option now for all Uplift families that wish to have that option for their scholars during this unprecedented time. March 2020,
30
when the
seconds.
pandemic hit for the first time, entire Uplift leadership, educators, staff worked day and night to make sure our kids' education and learning were not interrupted. We commend you for that. And we would like to see the same urgency and leadership in you now, because the fact is, COVID is not done with us yet. Rather, it became more aggressive, especially for our kids. With that, I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Farouk, for those comments. We next have Ulfath Fatima. Ulfath, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Fatima. Ms. Fatima, you have 3 minutes, and I will give you a 30-second warning when we get there.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ulfat Mir, and I'm a proud parent of 2 beautiful kids at North Hills. I would like to applaud the leadership of Uplift Education for reminding our kids each day to be well-rounded scholars. To name a few, accept responsibility, embrace opportunity to grow, and mediocrity is not an option, especially not for leaders who advocate these values. Delta variant causes more severe illnesses in unvaccinated kids, and there are no pediatric beds. Each day, we send our unvaccinated kids to school at its full capacity during a pandemic, with the expectation and trust that you, the caretakers, the teachers, the guardians of our kids, will be exceptionally responsible. We look forward to you for safety of our kids while they are under your watch. But unfortunately, we were let down. We were not timely informed of confirmed positive cases for 3 consecutive days, like August 13th, 16th, and 17th. And in return, we were told the resource was absent. We expect acceptance of responsibility. As per your twofold communication practice, and I quote, entire grade level of the confirmed positive scholar will be communicated, but only few parents received emails. We expect everyone's life be valued. When we inform the school of close contact during lunchtime, car line, or snack time, we are told to send our kids to school as the school does not identify them as a close contact. We challenge the contact tracing protocols or perhaps its execution and expect embracement of opportunity to grow. We are terrified to send our kids to school because many exposed kids are sent to school because of the inculcating fear of losing their spots. We expect you to exercise compassionate leadership. I need you to please add this to your agenda for a vote. Timely communication of COVID to everyone. Revisit yours and honor our contact tracing protocols. Clarify to parents they will not lose their spot at school for keeping their exposed kids at home. I'm speaking on behalf of all Uplift Education parents, and you will not find one who would disagree. Safety of lives of our innocent kids is in your hands. God forbid if anything happens to our kids on your watch,
30 seconds.
you will be held responsible. Because when it comes to lives, and especially lives, mediocrity is definitely not an option. Only excellence will do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fatima. Next, we have Pamela Knight. Ms. Knight, are you with us?
I am.
Great, thank you, Ms. Knight. You will have 3 minutes, and I will give you a 30-second warning.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Pamela Knight, and I'm a proud parent of a scholar at Uplift Infinity. I represent the 500 plus concerned Uplift parents. I believe that teaching our children that their worth is based on anything other than their humanity in itself is mentally and emotionally damaging and irresponsible. Regarding the email sent to some families, how can you choose a child's worth based solely on their circumstances? How can you tell a child that they are less deserving of safety because their parents work away from the home and cannot consistently see over their online learning experience? You can't. Basing their acceptance into a virtual option due to their testing scores is nothing short of discrimination, and we all know it. The very thing we are all supposed to be teaching our children is wrong in today's society is being used in your methods in choosing who should receive the option to learn safely from home. Our children are anxious these days with the ongoing crisis of the pandemic. Anxiety in children is so sad, especially when we can do something to help it. To tell them that they did not score high enough on a test to even be considered as a candidate for a safer option is telling them that they are not worth as much as their peers who may have scored higher. I don't believe that I need to explain to a room full of adults just how wrong that is. Your very own mission statements on serving responsibly in communities and human capital contradict your irresponsible actions, such as unsafe schooling for our future human capital. I am requesting that an item be added to your next meeting agenda for a vote to implement a virtual option for all scholars who would like the choice, based solely on their decision and not by any discriminating factors. Our children, your scholars, are our future. It is up to us to show them how to be responsible and empathetic human beings. This starts with how we treat them and each other. They will learn from our mistakes and our victories. We have the choice to make our victories louder. I thank you all sincerely for your time and for your consideration. I truly do hope that you have heard our request for what we know you are capable of. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Nye, for your comments. Next, we have Lokesh. Lokesh, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you, sir. You will have 3 minutes, and I will give you a 30-second warning.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Lokesh Gawda. I'm a parent of Uplift North Hills Primary Scholar. Today, I'm here to talk about an important topic, and I represent the concern of 500 plus Uplift parents. Honorable members of the board and the executive committee, today, as we navigate through this unprecedented situation, and each of our family are going through our own share of challenges and difficulties. Understand that a lot of our decisions in today's world are made based on the facts and statistics rather than the emotional values. But let me just take a minute to explain my personal situation. My parents live in India and my mother is undergoing an important medical surgery this week. I had my flight ticket booked for yesterday, and at the moment as I speak, I was supposed to be landed in India. I wanted to be with my mother while she undergoes this surgery. But I had to cancel my tickets in the last minute and postpone it by 2 weeks because I just can't leave my family here while my son is going to in-person school, and there are cases reported every day. And in fact, they're rising day by day, which is most worrisome. And this is affecting mental health and well-being of the family. Adding to that, I also have a 2-year-old at home who is vulnerable for the exposure. Board members and executive, this is not just my situation, but there are a lot of other parents who are in a similar or different challenging situations and are unwilling to send their kids to in-person school and prefer virtual learning if given a choice. It's just that many parents are afraid to come out in the open and talk about it because of fear of losing the spot in the school. We all love the school, but at the same time, the safety of our future generation is of utmost and highest importance. You all know and understand how dangerous and fatal this virus is and can be for the unvaccinated population, especially the current variant. And there is a variant reported every day. It's not the time to compromise on the safety of our kids and the scholars. We all believe and agree that virtual option for all the scholars is the only solution under the given circumstances. So my request and question is why the board and executive members are not acting upon this matter with a sense of
30
urgency.
seconds.
I urge the board members and the executive to use the available funds where it matters the most and take a look at this matter with a sense of urgency and ask that yield the rest of the time today and add this topic to your agenda and vote to implement the virtual option for all scholars on immediate basis and provide quarantine by choice for all scholars until a virtual option is fully implemented. With that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. I'll close.
Great, thank you, Lokesh, for those comments. Thank you to all the speakers for your thoughts and comments this afternoon. Richard, I am handing it back to you.
And I will just reiterate again, thank you again to all the speakers for your thoughts, your reflections, and your comments. And certainly the board will we'll reflect on it after this meeting at some point. Our next order of business is a finance update from our CFO, Jim Jonke. Jim, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, Jim is here.
Hi, good afternoon. Today I'm going to go over the beginning of the school year enrollment status. Enrollment from the start of the school year through the end of the school year follows a typical pattern. Starts slow, enrollment efforts continue in earnest for the first 6 weeks, and then falls as students withdraw throughout the remainder of the year. That was this slide here. So now the next slide, please. Hey, can you advance one more slide? Thanks. Great. So this goes through over time what all the different targets and the budget levels are. So pro forma is the maximum number of scholars that can be enrolled. In spring, we build a budget, which we believe is a realistic budget based on retention and attrition trends. We attempt to enroll to a maximum enrollment target that would enable us to meet our total year budget. Generally, we have a drop between day one before school and the first day of school. If you turn the slide, this year that drop was significantly greater than in prior years. I go back to last year as the first bar. We dropped 2,420 scholars during the summer time period. This year we dropped for about 4,400 for this school year. So we had a low next page, please. We had a low enrollment on day one. Since that time, we have enrolled over 1,600 new scholars. However, we've had to revise our target downward to 23,753. Right now, this morning, there were 500 scholars in the enrollment pipeline. This means we have drawn them from the wait list, and there are forms for them to complete and fill out, etc. Many of these scholars will complete the process and enroll over the next couple days. Some will drop out during this process. So if we go to the next page, this is the status across all schools and all grades. Red means these are grades that have not met their enrollment targets. Green means they have either met or exceeded their enrollment targets. This is as of yesterday afternoon. Now with the red grades, some of the schools have undrawn wait lists. Some of the schools already have depleted wait lists. The next page, please. And this is what we're going to do over the next several weeks, both in the schools and at the CMO, and then also what we're going to do with you, the board. First off, schools with waiting lists will draw scholars until the targets are met. Schools and grades without a wait list are considered continuous enrollment schools. That means if someone doesn't apply, they will go directly into the school and complete the enrollment process. At the CMO, we're looking at adjusting staffing levels, rebalancing, and initiating other potential recovery actions. And for the board, we're going to keep the board informed as enrollment efforts continue. And then in October, at that meeting, is when we're going to bring you an amended budget for the remainder of the school year. With that, do we have any questions?
Jim, I know that you're working diligently on this and working with the administration to continue to to buffer up the student count. And again, I thank you. I know this is also something that we're seeing across other ISDs. There's been local coverage of that as well. So I appreciate all that you're doing, and certainly recognize that this is something we've experienced in the past, and we'll get through it. I guess there was no other questions. The next order of business is to address a handful of administrative action items, and I'll hand it back to Alex for these. Alex?
Great. Thank you, Richard. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the first administrative action item we have up is the annual special education policies and procedures. As many of you may recall, we do this every year, adopting policies and procedures. These things set out such things as ARDs, procedural timelines, and the like. And we have with us at the meeting Annette Enright, our Senior Director of Special Populations, who is going to go into a little bit more detail with the board. Annette, are you with us?
I am. Hi, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you, Annette. Thanks.
Perfect. Perfect. So good evening, everyone. Glad to be here with you. I have a short amount of time to kind of share this information with you, but just a quick update on our scholar census related to our special populations. So right now, currently, we have, or I'm sorry, as of summer snapshot, we have 496 scholars who are currently in Section 504. Which means they have a disability and may require an accommodation plan on campus. And we have 1,865 special education scholars, and you'll see a breakdown by our disabilities below. There is a typo next to intellectual disability that should read 176 and not 17. But we have currently 315 scholars who qualify for special education with autism, 176 who qualify with an intellectual disability, 956 scholars who receive speech therapy, and 274 scholars who are in a self-contained setting. So I'm going to go into just quick updates of our policies from the previous year, or revisions to our policies. So next slide, please. So because of our COVID response to special education evaluations, we did have to revise our evaluation procedures within our policies and procedures. And so we outlined specific detailed procedures regarding evaluations if and when we ever were to have some sort of school closure. We had 59 evaluations that were impacted by our COVID closure. And so those timelines were extended past the normal 45-day school day timeline. But we kept our kiddos safe, and so that was the first priority. And then we also did some updating to our policies and procedures related to virtual ARD meetings. We are still holding our ARD meetings virtually and our 504 meetings virtually. We have really tight conference room and spaces on our campuses. And our parents really enjoy attending these meetings virtually because they don't have to miss work. And so the virtual option is still on the table. Of course, parents do have the option to request an in-person meeting. In terms of instructional, just quick high-level instructional updates, we do have approximately 15 medically fragile scholars in special education, and 6 of those scholars are in a homebound setting. So I want to be clear that because a scholar is medically fragile doesn't necessarily mean they need homebound services. And if a scholar is on homebound services, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're medically fragile. And so the numbers are, there's a lot of gray in the numbers, but that's where we're sitting right now. And so how we've addressed IEP services in virtual learning and how we've addressed homebound services, if we ever have to go back to virtual learning, is that we've developed what we call IEP contingency plans. So every scholar, every one of those 1,800 scholars has a contingency plan in their IEP, so that if we ever do have another closure, we do have a plan that we can address and support them from afar. So that's what I have. Those are the top high-level updates and revisions to our policies and procedures. And I can answer any questions you might have. Okay.
All right. Well, hearing no questions. Many thanks, Annette, for the time this evening. Great job as always. Richard, I will kick it back to you real quick if you would like to ask for a motion.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Is there a motion to approve the 2021-2022 Special Ed Annual Policies and Procedures as presented?
John Beckert, so moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
John McPherson, second.
Thank you, John. Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, I ask Alex to know that all members of the executive committee present voted in favor of the motion and the motion passes. Thank you. Alex, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Richard. Moving on to the 2021-2022 Scholar Code of Conduct. Again, I'm sure as many of you know, the actual Code of Conduct is required by law to be approved annually by the board. And we are very lucky to have our Senior Director of of Wellbeing, SEL, and Restorative Practices with us, Lisa Schmidt. Lisa, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Great.
But I have a little tech issue, so you can't see me, but I'm very happy to be here with everybody.
That's all right. It's great to hear you, Lisa.
All right, so what we have put in front of you, traditionally, the Scholar Code of Conduct has gone up before the board in July. And so we are proposing putting forward almost, for the most part, the same Code of Conduct that we used last year that was approved with some very minor changes to it as we begin to move more towards restorative practices. So if you will change to the next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So our restorative practices. So on this slide, you'll see this is an example of some ways that we have changed it. So we're taking out language such as penalties and putting in words such as potential consequences and saying, referring to restorative practices such as behavior and the opportunities to use restorative practices as opposed to the word discipline. If you go back to the previous slide, please. So this is the launch of our program. We are very excited to be launching restorative practices because we know that evidence tells us that this will help us reduce our racial disparity and our exclusionary discipline. And it will improve and aligns with all of our IB practices. So we're launching a pilot of 13 schools, 2 primary, 6 middle, and 5 high schools. They'll be doing a full implementation of restorative practices. 33 schools will begin their introductory training on restorative practices. We will have this fall work on a new code of conduct, writing it into a code of responsibility that we would like to launch next school year. And as I said there, the one thing that we have done is just change some small verbiage from punitive to restorative. So that's the request is that we approve the new code of conduct with small changes.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Lisa?
Hi, Lisa. This is Dawn. I do have a question.
Yes.
And this may or may not be. This is more about the training on restorative practices more so than the change of the word. And you may or may not know this answer, but I've been reading a lot lately over the past year or so about adultification of Black and brown girls.
Yeah.
And really addressing that issue. I believe it partially can be addressed in the restorative practices, but it absolutely can be addressed in the training. And so does training cover this specific element, or is this part of it at all?
Right now, the training is primarily coming from National Educators for Restorative Practices and International Restorative Practices sort of framework. But I too am aware of the adultification of our African American young women. And I think that I know that when we use restorative practices, it is going to help all of our educators to see our young people as young people, to see our children as children. One small change in that is, as opposed to saying the offender, we start saying simply the child, or the student, the teenager. And just changing those sorts of languages are going to help us to change our view of our young people, that they are still impressionable, they're still highly educable, and they should be treated as children, not as adults. And so I believe that this will indeed help that, but I'm glad you brought it to my attention, and I will make sure that that's embedded in our training in the future.
That's perfect. I really appreciate that. I think that it will also, its goal, I think, is to eliminate having any type of restoration needing to be in place anyway. So it is to say, you're not being disrespectful, you're just being a kid, and because you're black or brown, it sounds different coming out of your mouth, so I respond differently. So I think the part of the training is will also help decrease the numbers that that will even have to, of scholars that will even have to have intervention. So I just think as adults we have more responsibility for that than the kids do. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn, and I would love to have more conversations with you about this as we move with this initiative forward.
Sure, absolutely. My pleasure.
Great, thanks, Dawn. Are there any other questions from the board? All right, hearing none. Richard, are you able to make a motion?
Well, first of all, Lisa, thank you for your presentation. This is a long-term journey that we've seen over, again, starting over last year or so, as we are really trying to, as all districts are trying to change some of their restorative practices to be to give, to treat kids as kids, and to give them an opportunity to stay in school and not punished unnecessarily. So is there a motion to approve the 2021-2022 Scholar Code of Conduct as presented to retroactively begin on the first day of school of the 2021-22 school year?
Can it be pulled up again, please? Just so it went away before I could. Thank you. Great, thank you.
This is Lael Melville. I so move.
Thank you, Lael. Is there a second?
Second, Cullen.
Cullen, thank you. Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, I ask Alex to note all members of the executive committee present voted in favor of the motion, and the motion passes. Thank you. Alex, I'll turn it back to you for the next item.
Great, thanks, Richard. And thank you again, Lisa. Up next, we have a resolution formally approving the formal closing ending of our Delmas Morton partnership with Grand Prairie ISD. This is not a new issue for the board. Yasmin, I know, has gone over this already in previous meetings. Again, just to sort of quickly summarize, tremendous partnership, very successful all the way around. Everyone was and still is very excited about the partnership and what everything we have done and accomplished with Grand Prairie ISD and at Delmas Morton. However, demographic data trending now and trending in the future really pointed to what is in the best interest of the district, Grand Prairie and Uplift, to wind that partnership down. This resolution is simply a procedural check the box resolution from the board of Uplift that, if need be, we can always submit to TEA. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have on this resolution. All right. Well, hearing none, Richard, I will give it back to you.
Okay. Again, since there are no questions, I'll just go. And again, thank you, Alex. But is there a motion to approve the resolution closing and ending the Delmas Morton Grand Prairie ISD partnership with Uplift as presented?
So moved. This is fine.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Cam Johnson.
Thank you. Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask Alex to note that all members of the executive committee present voted in favor of the motion and the motion passes. Thank you. Alex, I'll turn it back over to you for the next resolution.
Great, thanks. The next resolution deals with vaccination incentives, and I know Yasmin is on the call and has some comments on this for the board.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And so we are requesting board approval to be able to offer non-monetary incentives to encourage families, particularly, and scholars to become more educated about the potential benefits of the COVID-19 vaccine, and then ultimately for secondary scholars to either share their vaccination status with us so we can get a better understanding of how many of our secondary scholars are vaccinated, and also to encourage additional scholars to get the COVID-19 vaccine. We've included staff in here as well, but really this is more of a scholar education and incentive campaign. We are working with our secondary school leaders. Dr. Washington is leading that effort with them of what are the incentives that might be the most compelling to our scholars. And it could range from, additional Uplift swag to dress down days to other types of incentives of that nature. And so we are simply just asking for permission to continue that campaign. Again, we would not be giving out any financial incentives. It would be, contained to rewards for students like a dress down day or some form of Uplift or campus swag. So that is what we are requesting as we continue to build out those plans with our campus leadership. And I'm open to take any questions that the board has.
Yasmin, this is Dawn. And I may have missed this, so please forgive me. What are our numbers now? And what are we trying to get to? I mean, I know we're trying to get to 100%, but like what would be that, kind of sweet spot where we'd feel much better about the situation?
Yes, Dawn, thank you. So we have roughly about 10 to 12,000 secondary scholars, and we right now have 1,500 vaccination cards on status. That doesn't mean that only 1,500 of our scholars have been vaccinated. That just means only 1,500 have shared their vaccination status with us. So part of this campaign could be just getting a more accurate understanding of where our current scholars are at. So, that's sub 20%. For Dallas County, the numbers that were shared for all of Dallas County 12 to 17-year-olds, it's about 35%. So it's much lower for this age category than it is the adult population. And Dallas County's numbers track fairly similar to the national numbers for this age group. So ideally, I would love our campaign to drive us north of 50% vaccination status. And that's what we're trying to do with a more concerted effort and just understanding more from kids why they are choosing or not choosing the vaccine at this point.
Great, thank you.
And Yasmin, did you say that we are currently not doing something similar with staff?
We are, because our staff already is vaccinated at pretty high percentages. So we don't feel at this time that there has to be a staff campaign. We aggressively promoted with staff vaccinations when they became available last March. And so really at this point in time, our focus is on our scholars, because our secondary scholars, one, have the ability to be vaccinated, which gives them an extra safety mechanism. And secondly, it's just harder with the way their schedule works during the day for them to be, regularly socially distanced with one another. And so we just think that it's the most optimal strategy for them to encourage higher vaccination rates.
This is Lael, and my quick question is around this opportunity. Have we seen that offering incentives is helpful around something like this?
It's unclear, honestly, Lael. I think that there's limited data yet. We've seen most of the incentives other districts have done have gone towards staff, not towards scholars directly. The Dallas County has just started a county-wide campaign for young people ages 12 to 17, where they are planning to give out free Six Flags tickets and free state fair passes, given the state fair is coming up. It's too early yet to see if that's driving any movement in the numbers. But in my mind, honestly, it's not, there's no harm in trying it, because parents who aren't comfortable with the vaccine, there's nothing that then forces them to do it. It's not a mandate or requirement. It's simply giving extra encouragement for those to become more educated about the vaccine and to consider it for their child.
Sure. Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And we'll, of course, share out data on any incentive campaigns we run and what the effectiveness is of them.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the resolution approving the implementation of a vaccination incentive as presented?
John Becker, so moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
John McPherson, second.
Thank you. Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, I ask Alex to note all members of the executive committee present voted in favor of the motion, and the motion passes. Thank you. Alex, I'll turn it back over to you for the next administrative item.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So the last administrative item we have on the agenda this evening is the proposed and recommended minimum attendance policy. The minimum attendance policy would set a minimum attendance standard for all scholars in the network at 90%, which for this school year, because it is 180 days, which means they would have to be in school for 162 total days. This is the same minimum attendance percentage that all students in traditional ISDs are required to meet per the education code. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's called the 90% rule. This is not a verbatim copy and paste of the that 90% rule that is in the education code. This allows us and affords us a little bit more flexibility when it comes to creating administrative regulations for exceptions to the rule. So in addition to the 162 days scholars have to be in class, that would give them 18 total days. Every scholar would be allowed, be permitted to be absent for 18 total days, regardless of whether those absences are excused or unexcused. If a scholar falls below the 90%, he or she could be at risk of losing a final grade or final credit for that class or all classes, depending on whether the scholar missed full days or partial days, what have you. In effect, what that means is that the scholar would be retained in that grade for another year. Now, as I mentioned before, we are going to create administrative regulations for this policy. One exception to the rule would be for absences due to positive COVID testing. And of course, as the year progresses, nothing right now. I think we've all gotten pretty used to needing to be very fluid in situations. And if the situation does change, and if additional exceptions need to be created or exceptions need to be removed from the administrative regulations, then we would obviously address those. But that is the proposed and recommended minimum attendance policy, and I am happy to take questions from the board if the board has any.
Hey, Alex, this is Andre.
Hey, Andre.
How does this compare to for the traditional ISDs?
Yeah, so again, traditional ISDs have a 90% rule that they are required to meet, and they have had that same rule for many, many years. Charter schools are not subject to the 90% rule, but just because we're not subject to that rule does not mean we can adopt it. And sort of given our focus on in-person instruction and wanting kids in seats, it is, I think, become very clear to us that we really would like to have implemented a policy like this. So very similar, but not, again, necessarily a mere copy of what traditional ISDs are subject to. Their rule is a little bit more cumbersome.
So do the students with virtual, and maybe you already have said this, do the virtual classes get credited for this school year? How does the virtual work?
Well, that's kind
Andre,
of a tricky
at this
question.
time, there's no virtual school.
No. I'm talking about the past, not now. Cumulatively, what I'm speaking of. Is this effective 21-22 school year? Right.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay,
This would be effective for this school year, 21-22 school year.
Okay. So let me do a COVID. They're getting credit for the virtual in the past 2021 school year, right?
Sorry, Andre, for sure. I'm trying to understand your question. Tell me again.
So when we doing our 2021 school year, did those students get credit for those during that period? Just curious.
We did not have this in place for last school year, and attendance was taken for virtual learning.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think last year showed us how critical it was to have this policy in place.
Right.
There's a high number of students we had who chose to miss school. We had hundreds of students miss 20 days or more, and or actually over 1,000 students missed 20 days or more, and we had hundreds who missed 50 days or more. And so both Dr. Washington and I strongly support putting in place more guardrails around attendance, so we have the best opportunity to educate our kids this year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Hey, Yasmin, this is Pilar. If the rule changes and students are allowed by the governor's new protocol or whatever, if they're allowed to study from home, do we have to revote this, or does it?
Nope, it would carry over, because if we are allowed to do a virtual learning option, we will take attendance every day in the virtual learning option as well. So regardless if they're in person or virtual, just like last year, we would take attendance every single day. And if a child exceeded their absences on virtual, which absolutely happened last year, even for virtual students who had lots of absences, they would fall under this as well, but you would not need to revote it.
Okay. And just last year, those 50 or 100 students that missed, a lot of school, are they getting credit for that, or are you assessing that? Or, are they repeating the year?
Not in large numbers, Pilar, and that's part of the problem, right? So we had literally, if I'm getting my numbers correctly, over 600 students last year, a combination of virtual and in person, who missed over 50 days, almost a third of the school year. And because last year was so unique, the state was more generous in terms of considering grade retention. So lots of students were able to be, I'm just going to call it, socially promoted to the next grade level. this would give us an ability to really be more disciplined about, is a child ready for the next grade level or not, that we just didn't have last year.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Pilar.
I don't hear any other questions coming. So is there a motion to approve the minimum attendance policy as presented and to retroactively begin the policy on the first day of school of the 2021-22 school year?
Richard, I'll make a motion to approve. This is Andre.
Andre, thank you. Is there a second?
John Becker, second.
Thank you, John. Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask Alex to note that all members of the executive committee present voted in favor of the motion and the motion passes. Thank you. Our next order of business is to retire to a closed session pursuant to section 551.071 and 551.072 of the Texas Government Code to consult with legal counsel regarding pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offer on a matter which the school district legal counsel determines should be confidential, including consultation regarding the legal implications of COVID-19 pandemic, and to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, and or value of real property. Executive committee members, you will receive an email with a separate link to access the closed session meeting. If you'll please click on that link now and call in if that's your preference, or call in, we will move into a closed session. The time is now 5:27 p.m. and the board is retired to closed session. I think we're ready to move forward.
Yes, Richard, you're back.
At this time, the board has returned to open session. The time is now 6:03 p.m. and I note that the same quorum of the board is present. As there are no further pending business before the board, this meeting is hereby adjourned. The time is now still 6:03 p.m. Thank you again, and thank everybody for joining today. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next meeting, which is going to be our board retreat. I think it's September 10th. And I just want to remind all board members that there's a email out there to invite you to a 360 review that we're doing for Yasmin, and that's going to happen with her, not only with the board, but with the staff. And so that's out there. And I just want to remind you to do that if you haven't already done it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening.